Greetings. Today we'll discuss about module number 5, which concerns about deep foundation, Gaussian foundation and sheet piles. To start our discussion, let's start with the classification of foundation. Foundations can be broadly classified into two heads, shallow foundation and deep foundation. This classification is based on the comparison of depth and width of the foundation. If depth of foundation is shallower than the width of the foundation or equal to the width of the foundation, we are going to call it as a shallow foundation, whereas it is greater than the width of the foundation, we call that as a deep foundation. But actual concern when we'll see about the function of the function of foundation is to transfer the load from the structure safely to the ground without excessive settlement or a failure. In when the case the topsoil is either loose or soft or of a swelling type, the load from the structure has to be transferred deeper to the firm strata. Then we are going to adopt deep foundation. If we want to classify deep foundation, further classify the deep foundation, it can be classified into broad four heads: pier foundation, pile foundation, well foundation and sheet pile foundation. So our chapter will concern about the design of all these four types of foundation. As at initial level, let us begin with the discussion on pile foundation. What is a pile foundation? The very first question comes with the what is a pile foundation? A pile foundation are a deep foundation which are formed by a long slender columnar element known as a pile. The vertical element which has been shown on PPT here, which is being having a shoe end at one side and a broader end on the other side, named as a pile cap, and steel shoe at the edge. So this end is said to be a bearing end, this end is said to be a loading end. In between there is a large length of the member, and this large length member in a slender portion, in slenderness, we are going to call it as a piles. They consist of they consist of two components, pile cap and a single or group of piles. Means there is one capping over the head of all the piles which are arranged in a group like the figure shows in a plan. They may be two pile or three pile or a group of pile, and number of piles may be there. They will be connected at the top end where they will form a sitting for a column to be rested. So this sitting is called as a pile cap, and below there we call it as a pile groups. These piles individually they may be of different shape. They may be square, they may be round, they may be octagonal, they may be made of various material. The classification and their arrangement and their function will discuss in the upcoming PPTs. Pile foundation are principally used to transfer the load from a superstructure through weak compressible strata or water on a strong or more compacted, less compressible and stiffer soil or rock. This type of foundation is used for large structure and also in situation where the soil is not suitable to prevent excessive settlement. So let's go towards the classification of pile foundation. The classification of pile foundation is being done on under various heads. So very first one with reference in accordance to the length to depth ratio. Where is the depth is nothing but the dimension of the your member, and length is the total length of your member. So here slenderness ratio has a big role in classification. So the short pile, the long pile, these are the two heads where we are going to classify the piles. The piles which are having L by depth ratio smaller than 4 generally are considered as a short pile. The piles which are having a ratio L by D ratio greater than 4, we are going to call it as a long pile. Now let us go with the classification with respect to the effect on the soil. So in case of pile foundation, what we are going to do, we are going to insert the pile in the ground. This may be done with various method. The very first one is very easy method of a very simple method is drilling a hole inside a ground by the boring activity and then inserting the pile there. Or sometime what will happen, we can have here precast pile, or we will get fill up this area which was bored out, or which the soil has been removed with a filler material like concrete in situation or any other material. Thereby we are going to create a long slender member touching up to a required depth, where we will have a hard bearing startup. The second one, we are going to have a driving activity where we are going to force the pipe inside the ground by a method, by hammering it or by punching it into the ground. So there are three methods, broadly the three methods which which can be based on the effect on the soil for creating such foundation, like driven foundation, driven pile foundation, board pile foundation, cast in situ foundation. In case of driven pile foundation, we are going to apply a load on the head of this, and due to the impact, the pile is going to insert slowly into the ground. Thereby the bearing strata will be achieved, and there we may have some advantages, like during this there will be certain resistance over the pile, the friction force will be there, that will make an additive effect in the load carrying capacity. In case of cast into site, we can have simply filling up the board area with a reference to a material, infiller material. In case of concrete, for example, if I say concrete pile is being filled up, here I can say concrete cast into pile. To increase its capacity, I can use a steel reinforcement or some other materials. So I will say there is a hybrid cast in situ material. Sometimes to improve its bearing capacity in at the ends, we are going to have a enlarged bulb shape. We call it as a ream piles. Okay, so we will say it as a under ream piles here. So this may be a single bulb here, or there may be multiple bulb here. So based on that, the classification will be further done as a cast in situ ream pile, or cast in situ under ream pile will multiple number of reams over it. Now, the third classification, it is with respect to the load transpiration and functional behavior. So here the load transpiration will and functional behavior will form the basis for the classification, like end bearing pile, friction pile, soil compaction pile, tension or uplift pile, anchor pile, fender pile, and dolphins, batter piles, sheet piles. Let's have some mechanism here. Look over the mechanism here. In case of end bearing pile, the load is transferred along the vertical length towards the ground through a bearing area at the required strata through the bearing area of the pile itself. So that type of your mechanism, that type of pile is called as a bearing piles. Whereas in case of the friction pile, we are going to take advantage of frictional resistance which are going to appear during insertion of the pile towards the ground, and only we will consider the capacity with reference to what type of resistance the soil has been offered against the driving of the pile. So we such a pile is called as a friction pile. Sometimes we can have composite behavior, combined behavior here, like end bearing plus frictional resistance. It will have two additive effects. So later on we will see the classification how we are going to estimate its load carrying capacity. Sometimes we are going to provide a piles which will improve the density of the soil, especially in case of loose and medium density soil. We are going to insert the pile which will act as a soil compactor. They will compress the nearby soil particle, thereby fill up the gap, compactness, thereby increase its strength. Okay, to improve its strength. We cannot say increase, improve its strength. In case of foundation like towers, where the towers are subjected to the lateral loads, there may be generation of tensile forces on one end and compressive forces on the other end. Now the function of the pile is to carry the tensile force here, and the function of the pile is to carry the compressive force. Based on this function, they have been classified as a compression pile or the tensile pile, or sometimes tension pile is also called as a uplift piles. In case of river stability of river bank or alluvial soil or very loose soil, we are going to erect a retaining wall made with sheets. Okay, these sheets are very thin members. They are going to insert in a ground with a cantilever action as same as the retaining. On the one side they will retain the material which are loose, and the other side they will have the protection towards the for example, if I am going to create it for a river nearby the river bank, so on one side there will be water and the other side there will be backfill. So sometimes to support this element, we are going to provide a tie members. They will provide some tensile force so that there should not be any overturning over the sheet piles. Such types of piles are called as a batter piles. If the assembly is too much bigger, the forces are too much bigger, we will take an help of some sitting elements which will support or transfer the tensile stress to their connection, that are called as a dolphin piles. They are generally used in case of offshore structure, where they will protect the forces, the current forces which are coming through the wave currents. They will dissipate that before that is struck to the sheet, thereby dissipate that one. That mechanism we call as a dolphin pile. The color picture here shows the position of dolphin piles, and here the sheet piles is somewhere before it. Okay, next to that, the classification based on the material used in it. The material used in it may be concrete piles. So based on, we are going to use here concrete piles. The concrete piles can be of two types, precast or cast in situ. In case of precast, we are going to create the pile of required dimension, required shape, required length, and then we are going to insert it with the help of a driving mechanism. In case of cast into site, cast in situ, we are going to fill up the board area, the soil which has been removed. That area will be filled up, backfilled with the help of your concrete. This concrete may be plain concrete or it may be reinforced concrete depending upon the situation. Now, next one is the timber pile. Sometimes the requirement of compressive stresses are not too much higher, but we require certain stability. In that case, we are going to use such type of piles which has a predefined dimension, which has a predefined and geometry and many more. So the third part is the sheet piles. In this case, we are going to use sheet elements which have been folded in different shape. It may be a straight one or it may be folded in a different shape. If it is in H shape, we are going to say it as a H pile. Piles, if it is being a circular shape forming a pipe-like section, we are going to call it as a pipe pile. Sometimes it may be a simple sheet. Okay, so we call it as a sheet piles. What is the mechanism here? They will act as a retaining towards the material, thereby improving the bearing capacity of that soil, especially in case of the alluvial bank, alluvial soil or loose soil, or the slopes area in case of hills. Fourth one is the composite piles. Sometimes we require improved strength. Only concrete put here will improve the compressive strength, but we require tensile strength also. Then we can add a member towards it. Slight tensile strength I want to improve, I will add some timber to it. Or I will require more improvement in that, I will use a steel, because we know that concrete is good in compression but weak in tension. So steel will improve the tensile carrying capacity. Likewise, the classification is based on the material. Now let us go towards the activity known as a pile driving. The pile boring is a boring activity. We are familiar about that. Simply we are going to drill a hole up to a required depth and then we are going to fill it. But in case of pile driving mechanism, there is a certain things we have to follow up, such that during the installation pile should not get break. During the installation there should not be harm to the soil, or due to installation there should not be changes in the nature of the soil. So the simply, if I want to define the pile driving, it may be defined as a process of forcing the pile into the ground without excavation is termed as a pile driving. In this pile driving, there is a certain mechanism where we will put vertically the pile over the ground and then we will apply the force on it. And this force may be applied with various mechanisms, and that mechanism has to be mounted on a particular automobile or on a particular set. That set is called as a pile driver. So piles are commonly driven by means of a hammer supported by a crane or by a special drive known as a pile driver. This hammer, which is mounted on this pile driver, is being guided by two vertical members so that it can run in a predefined predefined track, and it will not have any overburden on the surface of the pile. So that members are called as the leads. These leads are being carried on a frame in such a way that the pile may be installed vertically or inclined. So depending upon the position, we can move it. Sometimes we have nowadays we have modernized equipment that we can house number of piles at a time. Okay, now hammers. The hammers which has been used in the pile drivers are of different types. Based on that, the capacity of the pile driver is being decided. The pile hammers may be a simple drop hammer where only a heavy load will be dropped sequentially over the head of the pile, and thereby the pile will be driven into the ground. It may have a single acting hammer or double acting happen. It depends upon the consecutive mechanism which the hammer will play on the pile head, so that a pile can be driven safely. Later on, the automobile has been moved, the mechanism has been moved towards the automation. We will use a diesel hammer here, diesel engine operated hammers, or we will have a vibrating hammers which will not only produce the compressive force, heavy compressive force on the head. They are going to have vibrative forces, so that there should be easy and smooth driving of the pipe. So we'll see this classification with the help of a pictorial format. Here this picture shows a typical layout of a pile driver. It has various components here. So here one hammer is there which is guided by your leads. These leads are on the crane. There is a perfect frame over this. On the head of the pile there is a cushion, so that hammer when you strike, the pile head will not get break. Then this this pile will